Welcome to Red Letter Disciple, a podcast that's going to challenge and inspire you wherever you are to grow in your faith, to grow as a disciple of Jesus. Wouldn't that be cool if we could all grow? How much amazing things would happen in this world if we could be a fuller, greater, truer expression of Jesus? And I believe that today's show is going to help you do that. So I'm going to be joined by my co-host, Chris Johnson, in just a couple of minutes, and we're going to be joined by Myron Pierce. Get ready. Hold on to your seats if you're sitting down. Like, we got an incredible story today from Myron, who was changed by God while he was serving a 200-year-long prison sentence. How did he get into that situation? And how did he get out of it? How did God meet him? How did Myron legitimately start pastoring and running small groups in prison? And what he learned from that now he's out there leading leaders, pastoring his own church, writing books, starting businesses. So it's going to be a really fun conversation with Myron today. Today's episode is sponsored by Red Letter Living. We create resources at this company that challenge people to grow as disciples wherever they are. And so, this podcast, that's one of those resources. But we have others. And if you're looking at a church, if you're a church leader or pastor, and you're looking for a resource that's going to help your people become greater disciples, and one that's going to grow your small groups by 40% or more, and it's going to bring unity to your church in a divided time. That's what our 40-day church-wide challenges have done for more than 800 churches so far. So you can find out more and request any free 40-day challenge you want. We have Red Letter Challenge, which is how to follow Jesus, Being Challenge, which is how do I grow my relationship with Jesus, and Forgiving Challenge, which is how do I really experience God's freedom so that then I can give it away to others. Those three are the ones that we have ready to go right now. You can check it out at redletterchallenge.com/church. Again, if you're a pastor and you want a free copy, we'd be happy to mail you one if you're in the United States. We have partnered with more than 800 churches to lead 40-day challenges and seen God do incredible things. So as you plan for the end of this fall, or how about this, as you start the new year or get into the Lent season, we would love to partner with you, and we have some amazing deals with our ready-to-go church packs. So grab one of those, and if you haven't seen a copy, want to feel it, want to touch it, we will send it to you. You can find out about all of our 40-day challenges and what it can do for your church at redletterchallenge.com/church. All right, here we go. Myron Pierce, let's do this. All right, on the Red Letter Disciple, you heard it in the intro. We are joined with the incredible Myron Pierce here in studio in Omaha, Nebraska. And I'm so excited to have him. Myron does a lot of things. He's a pastor, a serial entrepreneur. He's got an incredible story. He's a father, he's an author, he's a podcaster, he's a leader, all of that.
Okay, you can stop right there.
Because I don't know how you pull it off. And hey, we were supposed to be joined by Chris Johnson, but he had some technical issues from Florida. So it's just me and Myron here today, holding down the fort. We're going to have a great conversation. So welcome to the Red Letter Disciple, Myron.
Appreciate it.
Happy to have you, man.
It's good to be here. Yeah.
Love getting to know you a little bit so far. And I'm going to love for our audience to hear your story, because I think it's so awesome. So I'd love for you to kind of just start from the beginning and talk about your because it's such a powerful story. So talk about your childhood and how you got. I want to eventually get to where you are today, but sure. I want to go through some big things that happened. And so tell me a little bit about how you grew up.
So I think like every inner city kid, we want to make it to the NBA or become the next Lil Wayne or something like that. But obviously that were not in the cards for me. But I grew up in a single parent home, man. My mama was on drugs and, in lifestyles that she had to pay the bills for the family. Dad was never around because, he was on heroin, right? And so, being on heroin, in and out of jail, in and out of institutions, and then seeing the domestic violence growing up in drug and gang culture, gangs hit the 80s here, from California, and with the drugs came the gangs, and then with the gangs come the, endless cycles of incarceration. So by the time I was just a teenager, early teenager, I was in and out of jail. And until I ultimately, at the age of 16, I'm facing 100 years in a penitentiary.
Jeez.
Right. And so it was in those times I would go to chapel, or the chaplain would come to the jail, and I would just kind of sit way in the back, and I would hear God has a plan, but I couldn't reconcile, number one, who God was, because I didn't grow up in church. I grew up in the streets. And so, but, at any rate, we know that the gospel is the gospel. And so it just, God was doing something in my heart. And so eventually went to prison as a teenager and got out and was out for about 5 months and went right back. And here I am facing a 200-year sentence.
Wow.
At the age of 18, 19.
Yeah.
And so it was in that moment where I had to make a decision while I had got booked into the Douglas County Police Department. God, if you're real, change me. If you do, I'll serve you for the rest of my life. Wow. And that was 20 years ago this year.
Okay.
In a jail cell.
Yeah.
And that's when the journey of truly walking with Jesus became a reality.
And I think so. What's hard for me is probably the only similarity that I can have in your story is I wanted to be in the NBA when I grew up, but it's not in the cards, right? I was like super tiny as a kid. I grew up in Memphis in my early childhood, and I just wanted to be like Anthony Penny Hardaway. He was my hero.
Oh, Penny Hardaway, man.
So he was my hero. I went to his basketball camp, got his autograph because he went to school in Memphis, and that's what I wanted to be. Had the little Penny.
And he's a coach now.
I know, of Memphis, which is cool. Yeah. So anyway, that's the similarity. But from there, it's so different for me because I grew up, and part of my story is a fourth generation Lutheran pastor. Mm-hmm. And so I'm living in this legacy that I actually feel like, my great grandpa, who I never met, made decisions 100 years ago that I'm still having ripple effects, that I'm benefiting from the ripple effects. And so that's why I love talking to someone like you, because it's a completely different perspective. But you have the opportunity through what you're doing to create ripple effects down the line, not only in family, but with your community. And so 200 years sentence. When you hear that, what goes on?
What's going through my mind?
Yeah, because to me, if I hear that, that's like, okay, life's over. I'm done.
Yeah, what's going through my mind as I'm leaving the courtroom? Number one, it couldn't register. It didn't register. Only thing I knew is that when I'm standing before the judge for sentencing, and a whole lot happened between the day I got arrested and sentencing that God did. But hearing from the judge, young man, today I'm going to make an example out of you.
Yeah.
And having mom in the courtroom, my daughter at the time, my daughter in the courtroom, siblings, and to get a 14 to 30 year sentence plus the 2 to 3 year sentence I wasn't done with because I was on parole, and walking out with a 16 to 33 year sentence.
Okay.
Really sent me in a tailspin. But as I'm leaving the courtroom, I hear the whisper. I hear the whisper from God.
Wow.
And I heard, and this was
the whisper?
The whisper is, I'm going to get you out of prison and you're going to be a pastor.
That's cool.
I'm shackled from head to toe, like that Snoop Dogg song. And, and I'm walking out and I hear that voice. And then ultimately they send me to prison. But I left the jail on my way to prison with a promise from God.
Wow.
And so I think the time in prison was God teaching me faith, because I think most people think they have faith, but I think real faith can only be tried in the fire.
That's good.
For us to really see it. And God used those years in the wilderness to refine me, to prepare me, to send me back to where I was from.
Yeah. So what ought to have been 200, the judge, in some way, it gives a lot of grace, 16 to 33. And so, okay, at least there's some semblance, but then hearing that whisper, I'm going to get you out. And one day you're going to be a pastor. Okay, so walk me through those years in prison. What's that like? Because we watch the shows, the movies.
Shawshank Redemption.
That's my favorite movie. Right?
So
tell me, what's that like though? Because
so some of it's real, some of it's just to get you to view it. But when I first hit the prison, now I hit juvie prison, which was which was just a bunch of young gangbangers locked up.
Yeah.
But when you hit the yard, there are a lot of assumptions, a lot of fears. And so I get there day one, and I'm walking in the chow hall, and all I hear is fresh meat. Like, and I'm thinking, I'm a Christ follower. So how do I reconcile being a Christ follower in a prison culture?
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm in the line, and I walk in, and the people behind the serving line ask me, "Hey, what cell are you in?" And I tell them what cell I'm in. All of a sudden, their eyes got big, and I'm like, "Oh crap!"
Does that mean?
Right?
Yeah. Does that mean something? That
They're like, "You're in the room with so and so. You don't want to be in the room with so and so because so and so didn't have a good reputation." And there's a lot of things that happen behind prison. And so I legitly slept with my pants on, my clothes on for 30 days straight because I was scared out of my mind. I'm just this young kid who's now saved. And God even eventually used that, "Oh, you're in the room with so-and-so," to actually lead this man to Jesus. Faith in Christ. And so there were instances like that. Second day I got there's another gentleman where I'm from, older gentleman who helped pioneer whole gang culture where I'm from. And, I went up to him, and we had a conversation, and ultimately I looked him in his eye, and I said, I'm following Jesus now. And he kind of looks at me and lets that set in. This is a guy who prays to the Crip God.
Okay.
He looks at me and he says, "Okay, if you're going to be with that Jesus guy, be with him. But if you're going to be with this life, be with that." And he walked away. And that was a defining moment for me in my early walks with Jesus, because to say, you're going to walk with Jesus, but then leave gang culture and drugs and leave that life behind, ultimately sometimes brings consequences to that, depending on your context. And so those were formidable years for me, where God was forming in me the ability to like draw the line between the world and the kingdom.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he did.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he did.
Cool. All right, so Myron, hey, Chris Johnson actually got his tech stuff to work, so he's going to join us in this.
Love it. Come on in.
And so, come on in, Chris. Chris, we're talking to Myron about his life and where he's been, and so he's in the middle of telling us this awesome story of how God's got him out of prison. And so, Myron, I want to hear then a little bit of like who it was specifically that reached out to you while you were in prison that sort of made a difference in your life.
Yeah, big shout out to Prison Fellowship. They were instrumental. There were several really lay people from churches that would come in consistently. These were people who maybe didn't have titles in their church, but would come to the prison consistently. I think of people like Art Lindsay or, Pastor Tommy or all these individuals, but more than the ones who came from the outside, God actually used the ones on the inside.
Wow.
And so there was gentlemen there with a life plus 60 sentence. At the time when I had arrived, he had already, spent 20 years. So he's probably been in for now 40 years or so now. And he would sit down with me every day and disciple me and pour his life into me. And he'd respond. He'd say this. He said, "Myron, I'm a missionary.
Yeah.
I'll die on this mission field, but I want to make sure you live on the next."
Cool.
And it was those years. And as I transitioned out of prison, he sat me down, he turned me to the book of John, and we started talking about the vine. And he says, you have to stay connected to the vine. And I believe that, you see great highlights like the great Mike Tyson or the great Bud Crawford, but we never see the people behind the scene. And he was the custom model that I needed to make it on this side, man. And I'm so grateful that God would bless me with this man of God. Yeah.
That's cool. And so I know that, everybody has different types of ministry or different ways that we walk out as disciples and, make our influence in this world. Chris, I know you've talked about prison ministry before and how difficult that is for you. Why is it difficult for you? And because I want to hear your answer, but then I also we can see the impact that it's had on someone like Myron.
Yeah.
So how can we as, disciples embrace this more.
So first and foremost, Myron, I applaud your story and what you do. Just a quick background. I was a young pastor, and I had a phone call once that really shook me up. A man had killed his mom, and he wanted me to come talk to him in prison. And I remember driving the 60 miles to that prison and thinking and praying, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm going to say, what I'm going to do. I knew the lady that he had murdered, and I was mad. I was angry. I couldn't understand it. And then I get in, and everything about prison ministry is so intimidating. It's like nobody wants to be in prison. And the guards didn't seem to want to work there. It was dirty. It was tough. It was like a Walmart that you couldn't get out of. Like it was just like so bad, man. And I remember sitting down at that table, and he sat down with me, and I was scared, man. Like I got back after that trip, and I said, I'll do 1,000 hospital visits if I never have to go back to another prison. Like it just freaked me out.
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering, Myron, like, what kind of advice can you give to a chicken like me, or maybe other pastors who go into prison ministry and they're just, well, you know, they get that phone call and I don't even know if I did anything good during that whole visit.
I think context and history can develop a sense of empathy. Context is the birth of the penal system comes off directly from the plantation. You know, 13th Amendment, that, you know, mass incarceration is the new, is the new plantation. And so when you see the effects of how that has absolutely traumatically impacted inner cities like ours, we start to see that why are there cycles of people going to prison? Well, we've disenfranchised a group of people who never had an advantage in life in this country, right? And we're obviously getting better. And yet, seeing the call of the Matthew 25 mandate, because we often hear people say, well, I don't know if I can be effective, or I'm not this and I'm not that. But I recognize that Jesus made it so simple. He says, when I was in prison, you preached to me. Nope. When I was in prison, you gave me money. Nope. When I was in prison, you sent me a letter. Nope. The verb there is simple. Visited. I visited. And I think it's gold, because some of the greatest prisoners are theologians, the Apostle Paul. Right. And so, but it can be. I just left the Nebraska State Prison last week. And I agree with you. I was freaked out.
And for clarity, on the other side, this time,
and anxious. I'm walking in anxious, and I'm recognizing that being in prison affected me in a way that psychologically I'm trying to process. And yet I get out there and stand before my brothers, and I say, hey, I'm Joseph. I'm Joseph. And I'm here to let you know what God meant for evil, what the enemy meant for evil, God meant for good. And so, and then you look in Hebrews, and it says this, and it's always convicting, even for me still. He says, you know, to remember those who are imprisoned as if you were chained with them. So in one instance, he said at the very minimum, visited, right? And then you get over here, and then he says, remember as if you were chained with them. And so the Hebrew writer what he's talking about, there's empathy. But he said, remember, which means I have to go back historically to look at what led up to where people have ended up. And that doesn't mean that people behind bars it doesn't mean that we're not supposed to take responsibility. It doesn't mean that we don't recognize our civic duty to be law-abiding citizens. It just simply means that we didn't get here by ourselves. Right. And with that understanding, it could give us a little bit of empathy, therefore, dealing with people, in a way that's humane. So I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah. And I think so. What I'm hearing in that is not only that we have a history, historical decisions that have been made that we should look at and we should understand, but then there's also the individual story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the empathy can come from. And I shared earlier, like you just had a different upbringing than I did.
Mm-hmm.
And that matters. Like what you come from matters. The people that are around you, they absolutely play a role in it. And so I love now, because you fast forwarded about last week, that now you're speaking to those in prison. I think actually the thing I saw on maybe Facebook a couple of weeks ago from you, I think you were speaking at the Global Leadership Summit which is awesome.
Chicago. Yeah.
And so I saw a thing that said that the message you were giving was going to be broadcast to 200 prisons. And I was like, that's so cool. He once had a 200-year sentence, and now he's speaking to 200 prisons. And it reminded me, and so as a preacher, I'm going to preach for 1 minute, and I'm going to pass it over to you. It reminded me, since you went there, Myron, of the Apostle Paul, who was in chains, who was in prison. And he wrote this book to the Philippians while he was in prison. And it should have been really easy for Paul to write, hey guys, this sucks. I'm doing everything right for God. And here I am. The food sucks. The garden smells. And I think we'd all been like, cool, man, we'll pray for you. That does suck. Right. Yet he's writing about joy. And he's writing, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and all these things. And so what he did and what you do is he took a prison sentence and he flipped it, and now he's writing sentences from prison. Come on, somebody. Whoa. Now helping us today. That's what I see in you. You flipped the sentence of 200 years, and now you're speaking to 200 prisons in one message.
And think about this, dude. Like in order for him to arrive at the conclusion in chapter 4 of Philippians, that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, he actually had to have experienced something that can validate that conclusion. And so I connect with that so much, because that's what, like when I talk about how I had to learn faith in that so that I can arrive at the end and say, man, I survived prison by the grace of God. I done seen people stabbed. I done seen people die. I done seen gang riots break out. I done seen race wars happen in prison. And it's like, God, I made it all the way through that. It has to be for a purpose. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And in fact, I was reading The Purpose-Driven Life when I was in prison, and I had this crazy Selah moment that solidified that promise he made me when I was leaving the courtroom, and I heard this, Myron, your purpose is bigger than your prison. And that message has stayed with me for 20 years.
Cool. All right. So you have this sentence that gets reduced. Then on the way out, then you hear God's whisper. Yeah. You go through that terrifying first night, first month. Start acclimating. Prison fellowship comes in. You get individuals that speak into your life from the outside, also those from the inside. God changes you while you're there. And I remember we talked a little bit last time. We talked about how then you went to work, man, and you were kind of pastoring and like leading small groups in prison. Tell me then. So walk me through the rest of the years of prison till you got out.
You had 200 years and it got reduced?
I was
200 years?
In 200 years, and then I was out of that 200 years sentenced to 14 to 30 years plus the previous sentence that I had to finish, which ended up giving me the 16 to 33 years. Yeah.
And how long did you serve?
Without parole. I was supposed to serve from 2000 all the way to 2019. Yeah. But the law changed in my favor. That's how I got out.
Yeah, so talk to us about.
So 7 months after I got sentenced, the law changed. They sent me a letter and said, "Hey, we're sorry, but we just want to let you know that law changed. LB 365." I'd never heard that in my life. Never heard anything in my life where you would change the law in favor of somebody who broke it again.
But their words were, "We're sorry," because I'm thinking, "That's why are you sorry? That's good for
me." They were like, "We're here to." What they said was, "We want to." Myron Pierce 55009. We want to inform you that your LB 365, and it gave me a parole date, because the caveat was I didn't have a parole date. That's why I had to do the whole time, right? 7 months later, that law changed, and years later, I ended up getting out of prison. There was a lot of things that happened. My case manager came to me and said, "Hey, we don't care about the law changing. We're going to make sure you're going to do the full you're going to do this full time, you know, 'cause
Yeah.
we're tired of you young gangbangers.
Hmm.
And God had something else in mind. I went to my cell and I prayed. I said, God, would you either remove this guy so that your plans can be, you know, go through, or would you promote him? I don't care, whatever, which one you want to do, right?
Just get him out of my life.
and guess what? The guy got promoted.
Nice.
And so that happened a couple different times.
Yeah.
And I believe it wasn't about the miracles. It was about the faith that he was building in me through his word. Right. And so eventually, man, like I started just discipling people. It was the passion. It was like, but gangs taught me how to disciple people.
Tell me about that. I want to hear that.
Yeah.
For pastors, churches, ministry leaders, organizational leaders, like if you want to learn how to make disciples, you have to learn from gangbangers. Because like we understand mission.
Okay.
We understand who we work for. We understand the goals and objectives of our mission. We understand culture building, recruiting, leadership development, and multiplication. Or probably over 5,000 gang members right now in Omaha, Nebraska, right? Like, so all those things didn't go on the back burner when I became a Christ follower. I'm like, okay, this is what you do. You do life with people. You give them a name. You give them goals. You hold them accountable, right? All in the context of life and relationship.
Yeah.
Right. And so I appropriated that same thing. In fact, I was at Home Depot today. Again, had one of my guys with me who I'm discipling. We're opening up some stuff. And a guy came up behind me. He's like, hey, what's up, Myron? I look around and I'm like, hey, how you doing? And we talk. And then after the guy leaves, I tell the guy I'm discipling, hey, you want to know how I met this guy? And he's like, yeah. I say, well, he put a gun in my face over 20 years ago and almost killed me. And this same guy who put the gun in my face was one of the first dudes I met when I was in prison. And he walked up to me and said, hey, do you remember me? And I said, no, I don't remember you. And he said, I'm the guy that robbed you. And I'm looking at him in his face right there. I put my hand on his shoulder and said, man, I forgive you.
Wow.
Whoa.
And this is in the middle of prison. And so my young disciple guy is now, because he had only heard, I would tell him stories about this, but then he ends up meeting this guy in Home Depot. Right. And then this guy is like saying, Myron, you the truth. He said, man, I'm hearing about you and what you're doing in our community. And so that's how we talk about evangelism. Evangelism is when people can talk about listen, sometimes I don't need to open my mouth for evangelism.
Yeah.
I just need to actually do the work so that people can open their mouth for me. And then when people open their mouth for me, my reputation precedes me. And as it precedes me, it gives me authority and credibility to speak into people's lives who actually need to know and understand the gospel that we preach.
That right there will preach.
Yeah.
That right there will preach.
That young disciple that is with you all of a sudden sees this moment and he's like, okay.
It was a powerful
the real deal here. And yeah, that's so cool. Did you get what you needed to at Home Depot?
I did, actually. More than what I should pay for.
Awesome. Okay, so then you're leading, and that's what I think is fascinating. So, taking the stuff of our past, and though at one time it was used in a negative context, how can we take all the good things in the gang culture that was in your past and now use it in your future? And so, I've seen you do this. So you started small groups, and you started discipling people in prison, and then you got out and you became a pastor, right?
Yeah. So a man named Ron Dotzler took a chance on me. And anytime I have an opportunity like this, I always give him his flowers before he died, because other people didn't take a chance on me.
Sure.
There were other organizations who decided that their policies and procedures were going to be the deciding factor versus taking a chance on me. And I had gone to college. I was in work release, and he met me at the Grace University campus, RIP Grace University, and he sat across from me and just asked me my story. Had no idea he was interviewing me. 2 weeks previous from meeting me, he's in Kansas City at an event listening to a dude named Osco, and Ron prays this small prayer: God, send me somebody like Osco for North Omaha. And so 2 weeks later, I was introduced to him by my now wife, who interned at Compass Ministries.
Come on.
That started by Christ Community, of which now I'm a teaching pastor on their
Wow.
church. Like, so the way that God does this, and then I come on staff at a Buy Network. I get out August 2008. 3 months from when I get out, we plant Bridge Church in the same neighborhood I was a gangbanger in. You can't make this.
Whoa.
So cool.
Wow. That's amazing, man.
Just power. And then all these kids from North Omaha, largest youth group, not even youth group, largest youth disciple movement in North Omaha at the time.
Yeah.
There was nothing like it.
So what I love is someone, and I think that's good for all of us to hear, is like, we know the history, we know the story, but we also don't get limited sometimes by policies and procedures. And just that we are people that give grace. We are people that give second chances, third chances, infinite chances. And Ron did that for you. We had Josh on the show.
That's my brother.
Yeah, I think it's episode 10, I want to say.
I'm his big brother.
Josh and the Dotzler, Ron is Josh's father. And so they really practice what they preach. And so I think that's really, really awesome. And so now you start this church, you're pastoring, but truthfully, and I think that this is where we're similarly wired, is that we love the kingdom of God. We love the local church, but we're also both super entrepreneurial. Mm-hmm. And so I see that in you. And so talk to me about what you're doing now to help entrepreneurs, specifically in the Black community.
The largest missional and entrepreneurial incubator on the planet is the local church.
Okay, tell me more. I'm intrigued.
Well, planting in urban centers are oftentimes challenging, obviously. And what I realized that if we were going to be a entree church, if we were going to be, we had to allow entrepreneurship to be a billboard or a Facebook post, if you will, for the culture, because the fastest way to stop a bullet is to help a person launch a business. And so internally in our leadership structure, I said I wanted to make sure that every person on our team cultivated their entrepreneurial side, so that they're not also putting energy in our church without putting food on their table. I wanted to help them, Ecclesiastes 11:2, move towards building 7 streams of income, because King Solomon said build 6, 7, or even 8 streams, because you don't even know when the day of destruction is coming. And that day of destruction came after COVID, when we had to tell our whole staff that no one on our staff no one's getting paid, but because of that, 90% of our team are all entrepreneurs. And what does that do for them? It creates a stream of income, but it also, their businesses are now missional fields where they're serving the broader community. And now they're mobilized to be all that God wants them to be. And now it's like we're building their thing and not my thing. Yeah. So Mission Church now is a hub for entrepreneurial, missionary, apostolic leaders who say, I have a dream from God. And my number one goal now is to say, how can I support you?
Yeah.
And we truly want to be, as a church that saturates every inner city with diverse, hope-filled missionaries and kingdom expressions. That's the overall goal. And we've recognized that the best way to enter into an inner city context is to meet the needs of ownership, because Black America is a nation of renters, right?
Yeah.
And so it becomes good gospel to say, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach him how to fish, you feed him for life. We say, no, actually show him how to own the pond.
Yep.
And so using this idea of own the pond as, yes, a redemptive opportunity for people to discover Christ, but also an opportunity for people to grow in their ownership of their future, so that they have more options beyond themselves. I like to tell our people, I want you to think 200 years out. Because what you're building isn't for you, it's for them.
Yeah.
Right. And so now we've built a brand in our community of Own the Pond, of which we've now, the whole goal behind that was like, what if we can shift? This is how it all started. What if we can shift North Omaha, 10% of North Omaha, to an entrepreneurial mindset? 70,000 people. What if 7,000 people in 10 years shifted? Right. And we started that 3 years ago, Shift Omaha. 1.5 million in revenue. Over 40 different entrepreneurs have gone through our process together.
Awesome.
Where we've journeyed, and everyone who, goes through that get to touch, feel, experience, and walk with people who love Jesus, who have been trained by me. Right. And so it's, God is doing so much. And through this ecosystem that we're building, we've launched things like a content platform for young entrepreneurs in our community to consume and grow and be resourced. Everything like from a podcast. We just launched the On the Pond Summit. Yeah. Next month, we're opening the On the Pond Business Center, where entrepreneurs can get co-working space, business coaching, financial services. We have all kind of organizations inside and outside our community. Yeah. It's going to be a hub of activity that's going to blow the hinges off of hell, man.
I love blow the hinges. That's really good.
I'm a preacher.
I know. Well, I said in your body, like 18 different things. So it's amazing. Gosh. Oh man, that's so cool. So tell me a couple of examples of how the ministry, the church, your church is now with the entrepreneurial side help. Like, what does that look like? How does that practically play out?
When we originally planted Mission Church, which we've planted tons of churches over the last 5 years, the strategy was, like the way that we impact will be kind of a quadrant.
Yeah.
Number one, we're going to focus on reentry and, giving people transitional homes, places to live. Second was the next generation. We're going to partner with the local school. Thirdly, we're going to have community engaging events where we can build relationship. And then the fourth quadrant was entrepreneurship.
Okay.
Right. And that's how we started our entrepreneurship incubator. Kind of how it began, but over time it began to evolve into something even bigger, which then out of that came the On the Pond message. But we just started with saying, hey, let's start an incubator. And so God kept giving us more vision, but we had only saw this little microscopic thing, right? And then at the center of all that impact is training. So missionary training is huge for us, and we've helped launch all kind of kingdom expressions because we said if we're going to reach the inner city, it's going to take all type of missions and ministries to make it happen. And we can't put a cap on what we customarily call church planting. Yeah, that's cool. So I just get excited talking about it.
And I think you were telling me about a couple of people in your church that are actually now doing entrepreneurial things.
Oh my gosh, man. So for example, the guy I'm discipling now, in true if it's not discipleship if you don't see that person as a son or a daughter. It's not. Yeah. It's not discipleship. It's transaction. If I can't see this person as my son, my daughter, or my brother, it's not discipleship.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's a different level. And so at age 3, his dad murdered his mom. So he has no dad and he has no mom. Dad gets off on a technical error in the court of law and goes free.
Man.
So he grows up unnurtured, grows up without a father figure, left to the streets, prominent gangbanger, has years down the line, has this powerful encounter with Jesus. We end up meeting and we start our friendship.
Cool.
And out of that, 2 years ago, he came to me and he said, hey man, I want to start a business. I said, no, you don't. So we got into an argument. Right? I said, okay, fire your boss today.
Yeah.
He said, I can't do that. I said, goodbye. I got up and walked away. I did a Jesus. I just walked away from him. I'm like, okay, you don't really want this. So we didn't talk for a whole year.
Okay.
Whoa.
Yeah, I was that serious. And after a year, he came back. He said, I'm ready to fire my boss. I said, my boy, let's do it. And so now today, he's replaced his salary and he has so much work. It's time for him to scale into a part-time position to be filled. And so now he's moving into employing people.
Cool.
From North Omaha.
Yeah.
And he loves Jesus. And he's a good dad. And he's making disciples himself after this. So it's just we could spend 3 days filming about just stories.
Yeah.
of what God is doing in the inner city, and it gives me hope.
Sure.
Do it.
You know what I mean? It gives me
We
hope
need to see those videos, man.
I know, man. And so now we're saying, okay, let's do this. The vision is always, let's do this in every inner city.
Yeah.
Now we have a verified way to start a new work in every inner city.
Yeah.
It's through entrepreneurship. And so now we have Selma, who's taking our training. We have Kansas City. We have St. Louis. We have Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
And then next year, I think it's we have Tampa. And so we're looking forward to starting shifts all in those areas. So what would be awesome is if we could start a shift in every major inner city.
So if someone's interested, like where would they get that training?
Yeah. So if somebody's listening and say, hey man, I want to open an incubator in my inner city, or you might say, maybe you're a rural pastor or a church leader.
Yeah.
This works there. Or maybe you say, you know what, I want to capture the next generation through entrepreneurship because they're already becoming influencers. Doesn't matter your context. So they can go to myronpierce.courses and go to how to start an incubator. And for this podcast, we'll do, Red Letter Challenge as the promo code.
Nice.
And they can download it for free. Take the training. And then if they need any additional help, come holler at me. I'm willing to coach. I'm willing to come set up a rhythm to launch these across cities in America.
That's cool. And we got show notes. So we'll put all the details in the show notes for that. That's incredible. So, and I do want to I want to do everything that I can. I don't know if you can tell I'm white, Myron.
What?
Chris
You
is
what?
white.
What?
Even in Florida, it doesn't catch any sun. But I'm passionate about fighting against racism, against injustice. I recognize that, even if the country is trending in the right direction, that it's not an overnight thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's
still a lot of work to do.
Centuries of oppression doesn't flip overnight. And so I want to do my part, but I don't always know what to do. Even when I came to Omaha, I was I listened to some other podcasts. I was like, put your money in Black owned banking. And I was like, cool, I'll do that. When I moved to the city, I got to find a new bank. And I was looking, I was like, there's not one in Omaha, and I don't mind paying a cost.
We're working on one.
Yeah, but it's hundreds of miles. If I have to drive an hour, because you can do most of it online these days. If I got to drive an hour 3 or 4 times a year, that are the rare times. But it's hundreds of miles away,
right.
So I can't. But
we're working on one.
Good. So what can? Here's my question: what can a white guy like me and a whiter guy like Chris? What can we do? How can we play our part?
So much. So listen, we put on the Pond Summit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it costed about $30,000.
Yeah.
99% of that 30,000 came from somebody who looked like you. So here are two things that are most important if we're going to change the trajectory of Black America: capital and social capital.
Okay.
Social capital is always first, so that we don't get into relationship where it's inequity because you've given me money.
Right.
So when we start with saying the first thing you and I can do is we have to be better friends.
Yeah.
Because if you trust me and I trust you, then you can trust who you refer me to.
That's good.
You can trust when I say, hey, we're opening up a business center and we need about $50,000 to renovate it.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you trust my heart because we spent time together, social.
Yep.
Now capital, right?
Yep.
And now all of a sudden, it's not just the capital you give, but it's the relationship we've built. We've built relational equity, right? And so at a fundamental grassroots level, I think the more interested we become in one another and building friendship, then we can say, hey, Myron, tell me about the vision you have.
Yeah.
What's the next step? So all of a sudden we say, okay, hey, bro, we have the mentorship aspect of our Shift Omaha program. Come down and do a 1-hour mentoring session on launching a podcast that scales your brand. Boom. Now I'm reciprocating the relationship by now helping you get social capital in my hood.
Cool. Yeah.
You feel me?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I want to jump in, because I think part of like my issue, or have had this issue a little bit in the past, is like build relationship, build friendships, but that's not supernatural for me, who lives out in West O, to build a relationship with someone in North O. And so what I think I'm hearing from you is because the last thing I want, I'll just say this, the last thing I want is to make my attempts at this, to make anyone in the Black community feel like a project, or to feel like a problem that I'm trying to solve.
Right.
Because that's just, I don't like that mentality. But the more I'm hearing is, tell me if I'm right, can we work on sometimes rather than just, I want to build a friendship, can we work on a project together? Is that what builds relationship, or what builds friendship?
So,
or what would you?
I'll say here's what builds friendship. Let's go golf together. And
do you play golf?
I do.
Okay, well,
yeah, I do. I didn't say I was good. I didn't say I was good.
Zach's not either.
Yeah, but so it's now. I'm glad you said that. A lot of people are project minded. So let's build our friendship on vision.
Yeah.
That, hey, God is doing something bigger than both of us, and it requires both of us.
Cool.
Nice.
And that's the reality.
Yeah.
Like it really does. There's no way I can do what I do. There's no way I can have vision to open a Black bank without knowing that I have some friends in there with me who would agree with me that God would do something, and that you'd open doors that I couldn't actually get in by myself.
Yeah.
Because there are doors that you have and friendships that you have. There's no way I can get to those.
Yeah.
You can say, hey, Myron, I know somebody who actually owns a bank. Oh, wow, I need to go learn from them. Yeah, let's set up coffee and we'll go together. And now you're using your social capital to advance the vision that God gave us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think it's, yes, we have some things ahead of us in terms of what we want to accomplish, but along the way, let's make sure that as we accomplish it, we're building friendship, because that's the only thing that's going to survive this part of, like, the reality is, yes, when we build a bank, cool, but at some point we leaving this earth, and the most valuable thing will be our friendship in heaven. Most valuable thing will be our relationship, right? Wow. And so that's what I've learned, and there are some leaders in my life that we have done it well. Doesn't mean that we haven't had there hasn't been bumps in the roads, but I can go over to a friend and walk in their Fortune 500 company and go straight to his office door and knock on and sit down and kick my feet up. Why? Because we boys. That's my homie. That's my guy.
Yeah.
And it's not a one-way relationship.
Yeah.
I have so much to offer the white community.
Yeah.
But until the white community, or when and if the white community, and I'm not just overgeneralizing, sure. It's like whoever, it's like, until, let me tell you a story. My friend has an elder he was in a conversation with, and his elder leads a diverse church. And he looks over and he says, man, I wish that my church was as diverse as yours is. I want a diverse church. And his overseer looks at him and says, you don't want a diverse church. So they get into an argument, you know, and he's like, what do you mean I don't want to? Yes, I do. And he says, no, you don't. Can I tell you why? It's like, yeah, tell me why. He says, until you're convinced that you need Black people, your church will never be diverse. And that's the number one question that us as leaders who are the majority, what is it going to be? What is it going to take to be convinced that I need Black people? Because the reality is that realistically, you don't. You don't. And that's where we can begin to build and do something great.
Man, that was such an eye-opening conversation, Myron. I thank you. I could listen to you for literally hours. This is awesome to hear. Thank you.
And the goal of this podcast, we said at the beginning of all the intros, is that all of us would be challenged and grow as disciples in order that we collectively would be a greater, fuller, truer expression of Jesus.
That's good.
And that doesn't happen when a bunch of white people become disciples. It doesn't happen when a bunch of Black people. It happens when every tribe, every nation, every tongue, because that's what heaven is.
That's heaven.
And I love, and that's what I envision, what I hope is that we get to see glimpses of that here in this, right? Like, kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so we need one another for the sole purpose of glorifying God
Mm-hmm.
and giving glimpses of what's next. And man, this was awesome, dude. So I hope we have a part 2 someday.
Man, I would
No
love
kidding.
So I got a question for you. We ask every guest, and then Chris has got a little quick game for us today.
That's right.
But the question we ask every guest, because this is a podcast ultimately to challenge disciples wherever they are to grow. So if you could issue one challenge to our audience, to those that are listening or watching, for them to practically grow in their discipleship this week, what challenge are you going to throw down?
I want to throw down the hope method.
Okay.
Simply this. I want you to yourself, because we can't preach disciple making if we're not,
Yeah.
How much time am I spending making disciples? That's the question. What percentage?
Okay.
Is it 1%? Is it 2%? Is it 3%? Is it 4%? So you can't conquer what you don't confront.
Okay.
You can't confront what you don't identify. Let's identify it. Secondly, let's work the hope method. It's my disciple making framework. H is hope. So you want to ask yourself every day, hey, how did I deal hope this today?
Yeah.
How did I deal it? Secondly, open up God's word and read it. And then you're going to ask yourself a head question. What does this say in 2 words?
Yeah.
Then you move to the heart question. Man, what's God saying to me? Number 4 is the hand question. What does he want me to do about it within the next 24 to 36 hours? And then lastly is help. What am I believing God for? What do I need prayer for?
Yeah.
And if you can practice the hope method as a new rhythm, then all of a sudden you'll look up and you'll see more generations of disciples making disciples that make disciples.
Love it. All right. So if you take on the hope method this week, why don't you go ahead and throw on socials, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can put in the comments below, #RedLetterDisciple. That's awesome. And Chris Johnson, I'm going to turn it over to you, buddy, for the game with Myron. What are we doing today?
So, Myron, you are one of the greatest comeback stories in the Christian church.
I like your voice.
You are one of the greatest of all time. That's correct. 200 years, this guy. That's as old as Zach. That's how much time he was supposed to spend in jail. But God had other plans, busted him out, started a church, brings hope, ladies and gentlemen. I want to ask you a couple of questions. This is going to be 2. Myron, I want to see if you can identify different greatest comeback stories of the last 100 years. Here we go.
Wow. Okay.
I'm going to read you somebody's story. All right, Myron.
I know what Chris is going to bring. We'll see what happens.
This person is a superstar turned actor who is worth millions of dollars, but the story how he got there is not very well known.
Tyler Perry.
No, not yet. No.
Okay.
1995, he had dreams of playing in the NFL. He was a defensive lineman for the Canadian Football League, Calgary Stampeders, but he struggled to even get playing time. Unsurprisingly, the Stampeders released him, and that he gave up his dream of the NBA or NFL. Shortly thereafter, Myron, he had to return home, and he only had $7 in his pocket. It wasn't long after moving back that this man developed severe depression and was wondering what the next chapter held. Ultimately, he turned toward pro wrestling. Through sheer perseverance, he molded himself into one of the most successful wrestlers of all time. And then the days of having only $7 to his name are way behind him. This man is now worth over $320 million and continues to make blockbuster films. Myron, who is this great comeback story?
I was going to say Tiny Lister.
That's funny.
I was going to say Tiny.
If you smell what the Rock is cooking.
I don't know.
Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, baby.
What a Rock. Oh, my God. I was going to say Kevin Hart.
I would pay to see Kevin Hart wrestle, by the way.
Yes. The Rock.
He would be good at, it'd be fun to see Kevin wrestle.
Because the context of our conversation, I was thinking he was a black guy. So you got me, man.
Okay, I got you. Well, here's the next one. The next one.
50%. Let me get this.
Yeah, you're going to get it.
This is the last one. Up until 2008, this man had a completely spotless reputation. Companies begged him to be a sponsor of one of their products. On the course, he was known as a killer and would do whatever it takes to win. Off the course, he was seen as a shining knight who never made a false step in his personal life. However, that story vanished when he was caught cheating with 120 women during his 5-year marriage. The world turned the back on him. Over the next decade of his life, he would spend his time trying to get back to the sport that he loved, but he couldn't because of back injuries. And then he was found in a vehicle, passed out. And a survey conducted after the incident, 70% of PGA Tour players said he would never win another major tournament, but he proved them all wrong. 2 years later, he won the 2019 Masters tournament. Who is this person?
Tiger Woods.
That's right. That's right.
Did you write all that yourself, buddy?
What?
Did you write all that yourself?
It's memorized.
It's the only thing I do, sit around writing stories for Myron. That's what
that's good, man. That's good.
It's my game.
All right, Myron, this was so fun, man. And if people want to learn more about you or how they can get connected to any of the million things that you do, where can they find you these days?
Depends on the purpose. If you want to know more about me, you can go to myronpierce.com. Want to know more about our church, thisismission.org. Or anything we're doing entrepreneurially, you can go to ownthepondnetwork.com.
Love it.
Love it.
Hey, Myron, next time I'm in Omaha, I'm not kidding you. I want to go with you and overcome my fear of prison ministry. Is that okay?
And then we got to go eat some fried chicken, bro.
Yes, let's go.
Amazing spot in North Omaha.
Where? What is it?
Time Out Chicken.
Time Out Chicken.
Oh,
it's from heaven. Those birds come straight from heaven.
It's like manna.
I mean, we send them to heaven. We send them to heaven.
All right, Myron. Hey, thank you, man, you're such a blessing to our audience.
Thank
and
you,
just love what you're
Appreciate
doing and your story. So, all right, till next time.
All right.
What an incredible conversation with Myron. I think this shows and tells us that nobody's story is ever over, right? God can rescue and God can do powerful things even in our lowest of places. Thanks, Myron, for being a part of the Red Letter Disciple. If you want to connect with Myron, any of the things he talked about, any of the links we shared, any ideas that, Myron and his team can help you with as an entrepreneur, check out our show notes at redletterpodcast.com. We provide these every single episode, all the links, all the key insights, and even some not so key insights organized for you, redletterpodcast.com. Again, I want to thank today's sponsor, Red Letter Live-In. We've got a free 40-day challenge for a pastor, a church leader out there. You can go to redletterchallenge.com/church to learn more about our 40-day challenge and how you can use those at your church. And if you've never gotten a copy of a book, we'd love to send you one. Seriously, our gift. All right, next week, we got Tony Morgan coming on to the show. Tony is another leader of leaders. Have you ever felt stuck in your faith? Or if you're a leader of a church, maybe stuck at your church? Tony founded, listen to this, the Unstuck Group, which helps us get unstuck and move towards health over and over and over again. He's done this with churches and individuals. And his team does quarterly reports to see the latest trends going on in discipleship and in church. So we're going to find out what's encouraging, what's discouraging, what we can take from all of this. Don't miss Tony's episode next week. So how are you not going to miss it? Subscribe or follow on whatever platform you're on. And while you're there, if this episode's helpful or you think it could be for somebody else, if it challenged you at all, would you please leave a 5-star rating? It seriously takes less than 2 seconds to do it. And that would be a really great thing for us. So I appreciate that. And if you want to write a review, that would also be awesome. So next Tuesday, we'll be back with Tony Morgan on the Red Letter Disciple.